Welcome inside the Broncos studio. I'm your team reporter and host, Elisa Hernandez, alongside lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. Thursday marked the last open practice of training camp for the Broncos as they welcome the Arizona Cardinals. A good, strong day. We heard head coach Sean Payton say this was one of the best during practices he's been a part of. Evan Ingram, also crediting the Cardinals defense, giving the offense some good work.
Yeah, well, first of all, congrats on making it through the first full training camp, right?
Yeah.
When we made it through day 13, 14, who knows what day it is at this point, but some good work for the Broncos. And I watched the offensive field mainly on Thursday. Obviously, can only be one place at once, and it sounded like we'll get to the defense in a second, but from what I saw on the offensive field, this was one of the better days the offense had all of camp. Bo Nix looked really good, really sharp. It started early. You talk about starting fast. It started with Bo Nix in 7-on-7, just completing pass after pass. And then when it got to team period, he was really good and found Marvin Mims a bunch, found Devon Vele a bunch in the 2-minute drill at the end of practice, found Cortland 3 times on that drive to lead a successful 2-minute drill. So from an offensive standpoint, I don't think you could ask for a much better end to training camp.
Yeah, and head coach Sean Payton said he was overall very pleased, and a couple big plays that happened, but a lot of off-the-field injury updates that Sean Payton also gave.
Well, first of all, Garrett Bowles exited practice, and it sounds like he's fine. Just a little bit of an asthma situation, so they held him out the rest of practice. Good news that he's okay, of course. And then Nick Bonito underwent a procedure. Sounded like he had a bone spur on top of his foot. But he'll be back next week, expected, or they're hoping at least, that he's able to play a little bit against New Orleans next week. And that kind of goes into what else Sean Payton said on Thursday, which is that because of the back-to-back joint practices, he had one last week against the Niners, this one against the Cardinals, and really got a lot of good work. They're kind of changing how they do the preseason snaps, and so not expecting the offense or the defense, the starters, to play on either side this weekend against Arizona. There might be 5 or 6 guys, he said, that'll get a handful of snaps, but for the most part, it's going to be the second phase, it's going to be the third phase, and they're going to get the action against Arizona. But then next week, whereas a year ago, I believe, we saw the starters not play at all in the third week, this year, you're going to see them a little bit against New Orleans. I think he said in the range of 7 to 8 plays next week. So if you're going to the Saints game next week in New Orleans, probably get to see Bo Nix a little bit.
And another update he had was about tight end Nate Atkins, who we mentioned will miss the early part of the season dealing with an ankle injury. So obviously we hope that he has a very speedy recovery. Now, when you look at the overall offense and defense, I feel like one of the recurring themes was needing to start fast. In fact, that's been a real focal point for both sides.
Yeah, and on offense, I thought they did that. Like I mentioned with the 7-on-7, they really did start fast, and there weren't kind of the same one-on-ones that you've seen and maybe you saw last week in San Francisco, but they just started with 7-on-7, and right away, Bo Nix was sharp. And, looking at my notes, there's a first down in the middle of the field to Pat Bryant early. That was a really impressive throw. And then you keep going, and it's a first down run for Bo, and then it's a pass to Devon Vele, and then to Mims. And so he was able to spread the ball a lot, and, we heard Evan Ingram talk about the variety of weapons the Broncos have and how you can spread the ball around and get it to different guys. But yeah, I thought early and really throughout the practice, the Broncos passing game was really sharp, and that's what they want to see defensively. Sean Payton said he heard from some of his defensive coaches, and Zach Allen kind of said the same thing on the podium, was that maybe they started a little bit slower. It sounded like when you're going against guys like Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison, those are really talented players, and so they do pose a problem. But the good news for the Broncos defense, that end of game, end of half, whatever situation they were working on, the Broncos got the better of the Cardinals in that 2-minute drill, so that's encouraging from a defensive standpoint.
One of the things that Evan Ingram also mentioned was the fact that this team has so much depth that he's able to kind of pick the brains of really anyone, even from the wide receiver to the tight end group. Obviously, being such a veteran in this league, he's still open to being a student of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And he mentioned, too, like he goes to that tight end U and learns from a variety of tight ends around the league as well. But, yeah, I mean, just looking at the notes, it's like it's a different number every line in terms of who was catching
They're very
the pass.
detailed notes.
And, you can't look at these. But whether it was, like we said, Mims, Vele, Bryant, Sutton, I don't know if I said it yet, but he had a really strong day, and obviously we know the connection that he and Bo have. So there are a variety of different weapons, and we've talked before, I think when we were previewing the season, that it could be a week-to-week thing of, hey, maybe it's Cortland Sutton's week, maybe it's Evan Ingram's week. maybe it's Marvin Mims' week. Maybe it's hey, we're going to run the ball 35 times this week. So that gives you options, and that's a good thing for a football team.
And you've heard head coach Sean Payton say that Courtland Sutton is a really big team guy. And so it's not really about his numbers, it's about the overall numbers and the W's on the board. And that's obviously good to have from a veteran wide receiver. Now, looking at Saturday's matchup, the second preseason game, they got the first work done in San Francisco, got the W there. What are you looking for from Saturday?
Yeah, well, obviously, like we mentioned earlier, you're not going to see the starters play, but that doesn't mean that there's not important things to figure out against the Cardinals. And I think the two main things are, one, he talked about you made mistakes last week, right? And there's certain things you correct. Can you correct those, or as Sean Payton put it, are you having Groundhog Day over and over, or you're making the same mistakes? That's where it becomes an issue. So you're looking to see, can you implement the corrections that you made this week in practice and kind of transfer those over to game action? And then I think all eyes are still on this running back competition. Sean Payton said after practice that earlier in training camp, he said, you're going to know when we know.
Yeah.
And we still don't know.
Yeah.
And luckily there's 2 preseason games left, and there's still a lot of time to make this decision. But there's a variety of running backs, whether it's a Tyler Badee, a Blake Watson, an Audric Estime, a Jaleel McLaughlin, and then obviously we've seen R.J. Harvey and J.K. Dobbins get a lot of work with the ones. But there's a lot of guys battling for spots there, and we'll see if one guy kind of takes a step this weekend against Arizona. But Sean Payton spoke highly about his hopes for the running game, that it will be better in 2025 than it was a year ago. But we still don't know quite what that room looks like. So something to watch on Saturday for sure.
I know that the coaching staff know this is a good problem to have so many weapons to choose from. Well, Broncos country, a reminder that Saturday the Broncos have a late kickoff of 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time as they host the Cardinals for the second game of the preseason. And as always, we have you covered with all the latest on DenverBroncos.com.